Hello everyone, it's Monday the 25th of January and welcome to episode 104 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I'm your host Ben Eagle and today we're back to normal format and I've got a great one-to-one interview for you with dairy farmer Dan Burdett, who I spoke to last week.
It's Farmer Focus.
Hello everyone, this evening I am speaking to dairy farmer from West Sussex, Dan Burdett. Dan is a third-generation farmer operating two different sites. One includes an autumn block calving herd of around 250 Holstein and Friesian crosses on a 300-hectare farm. The Burdetts also operate a mixed dairy and arable farm on contract located in Kent. And so in total, they're farming around 600 hectares between the two farms. Dan took over farm operations from his father in 2013. And focuses on running a low input, low output system. The farm had already converted to organic production in 1999. Dan also recently completed a Nuffield scholarship entitled Regenerative Agriculture, Making the Change Happen, which, dare I say, I don't think you could have a more fitting Nuffield for today. The days we're in. Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Thank you.
I mean, it's not the place I'd normally start, but can we start with your Nuffield? How long have you had an interest in Regen Ag, and why did you choose it for your Nuffield?
So Regen Ag, I guess, started with herbal lays. About 6 or 7 years ago, we were wondering about doing something a bit different, growing something different on our grazing platform. And our nutritionist Lupo said, "Have you seen these herbal lays?" And we went to see a couple of farms. Went to see Rob Richmond, who's on the Cotswold Brash, and saw what he was managing to grow there and how he managed to transform his farm's fortunes, really. So we came back, we started growing them, and we haven't looked back really. It was, slowly getting there, changing the whole farm over. But it's sort of, you start then reading about plant diversity, about different rooting depths, about the way that plants talk to one another and the microbial life around their root zones. And we saw greater production, and we saw more resilience through certainly the drought in 2018. The drought last year was worse for us. It was more of a struggle. But as soon as you start delving into things like regenerative agriculture, it's a bit of a slippery slope. There's no way of stopping yourself. And I guess part of my Nuffield the reason I looked at it was because I'd read a lot of books, I've been to a lot of conferences, I've spoken to a lot of people, but you can be overwhelmed with ideas and you can, all the best will in the world. How do you actually implement them?
Yep.
And this is someone like me who's really passionate about it. So I sort of set out to find out, how do people actually get beyond just reading a book or, listening to someone and then, actually walking the walk. So that's what inspired me then.
Yeah. And I mean, COVID came in on the sort of back end of your travels. I mean, how did COVID impact you?
Yeah, it's sort of frustrating. I sort of nearly got over the line. I was in Australia, and when I went out there, everything seemed okay. Planes were okay. No one was really wearing masks. And sort of a week and a half in, the panic buttons started flying around. This was March last year. And I got lots of nervy phone calls and texts from my wife and then the rest of my family as the pressure was applied. So I was due to go to New Zealand to the triennial conference. That was cancelled at the last minute. So I luckily managed to get on the sort of second to last plane out of Melbourne, much to my wife's relief. So I was going to go to South Africa and Zimbabwe, and I think that would have been one of the highlights because everywhere else I've been was a sort of developed country, and I was really looking forward to going somewhere where they are at the coalface. They are looking at desertification but also the kind of political and social upheavals in those countries. So I managed to speak to a lot of people. With modern technology, I managed to speak to a lot of people instead of seeing them.
Yeah, because actually, dare I say it, for this year's lot of scholars, it must have just been
really hard.
really hard.
For them. Yeah.
Let's go to learning points. What did you take from your Nuffield? Well, if you're talking about application,
Yeah.
was there anything, I suppose, number one, that you felt you could bring back to your own farm, and number two, was there anything that would be applicable on a more of a UK basis?
Yeah, so it's my own farm. I guess seeing people actually putting it into practice and seeing that it's about having deeply held beliefs. And I think I've got those deeply held beliefs, but not focusing enough on the core of them, trying to read about everything and trying to implement everything. It's just not possible. So
Yeah,
for me it's diversity. So it's, starting with the herbal lays, but diversity, we want to diversify a bit away from cows, or not away from, but in addition to cows, giving other people an opportunity to maybe start their own business on the farm here, that sort of thing. So bringing a diversity of people. So I think that will get me started, and then I can start looking at the diversity in the soil and understanding that a bit more. But I think that's the top line. So yeah, just focusing was for me. The rest of the industry, the big thing for me in Australia, the sort of light bulb moment, was that most of the people I was meeting weren't organic, and it's people like doing it because there's no prescription to it.
yeah,
So it's whatever you feel is right on your farm within your context. So you might want to keep some sprays in there as part of your armory just in case, but generally people are moving away from that. I think if you told any of the people that I met that they were going to be certified and have to have an auditor come around every year, they would probably run for the hills. So I think my take-home message that I brings a lot of people, amongst a lot of other things, is just we've got to be really careful, because it's a farmer-driven movement, and it can quickly be taken over by other organisations and who have the best intentions as they set out down that road. But
yeah,
farmers are getting into this because it's actually what they believe in doing. They're not being told to do it.
yeah,
So that freedom of choice and expression on their own farm is so important in this day and age of audits and meeting specifications and things like that. It's something they want to try it and do for themselves, and that passion. You can't audit passion. So
I mean, you came on the Kite podcast about sort of 6 months or so ago, and I remember us talking about this then, but in terms of a dairy context,
yeah.
how does Regen Ag work in a dairy context? I'm just interested to how your thinking has developed since 6 months ago, if at all.
Yeah, I mean, my situation is typical, I suppose. The farm that we've taken on is requiring a huge amount of investment from both parties. Kind of 800 grand in the first 2 years. Well, we've got to pay that back, and so my priority is making sure we produce enough milk cheaply to start paying that back.
Yeah,
So we want to get into regenerative agriculture, but my priority is not regenerative agriculture right away. My priority is the business. So that is, for a lot of dairy farmers. So you've got a lot of people in dairy coming out of the industry and being replaced by very ambitious, often young farmers, either their first farm or expanding their business. And
yeah,
so they're taking on a lot of debt in order to do so. And so with a lot of debt, you're not going to risk everything. You're going to do something which is tried and tested. You're going to grow grass using nitrogen fertilizer, because if it rains and you get that, you will get X growth, you will produce X kilos of solids. So that's the big challenge in dairy. I think a lot of dairy farmers would feel they're already down that road. They've got grass, so they're covering the soil. They're not tilling the soil, things like that. So the regenerative principles are kind of there. But as far as going any further, I think it's that risk factor, Ben.
yeah. So you grew up on the farm. Tell me about what your childhood was like, and I mean, ultimately, you didn't decide to go into farming straight away.
Yeah, so my dad is I work with my dad here. My grandfather was a dairy farmer on another farm as well. So the farm we're on at the moment is, I guess I'm the second generation here, but it's very much not a long-term generational farm. There's not that much history here. Yeah, when I was a kid, I used to play with my tractors, like Britain's toys. Like I was an
Yeah.
absolute
Yeah.
fanatic for that. I put little paper clips on them, like an aerial. All the contractors had massive CB radio aerials, and I loved all that. And yeah, in the summer holidays, I'd be there bale carting for what seemed like months on end, sweaty barns, and all that with my friends. And it was good. I earned lots of money and bought my bikes and computers and all that sort of stuff. But that's about as far as it went. And as I was becoming a teenager, and all my friends live in a town, I didn't have any country friends. They all lived in towns, and they were all able to go down to Brighton, have nights out,
Yeah.
go shopping or whatever, and I wasn't able to do that. And so from there grew this kind of desire to up and leave. So yeah, when I went to university, I did a business studies degree at Derby University. And then kind of the path you travel is I did a graduate training scheme at London Electricity in sales and marketing, and then did project management for a bit there as well after that. But yeah, sitting in a big office, I guess I felt a bit lost, sort of lost my way a little bit. Yeah, I took redundancy and travelled the world with my wife, or my girlfriend then, my wife Emma now, for a year, which was amazing, a great opportunity, and then came back and really lost my way in life. What was I doing? So yeah, so it's been a long old route back here, but really enjoy it. I don't regret any of it at all.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, let's delve a little bit more into that, if that's okay. I mean, you spent 3 years at EDF,
Yeah,
and then you spent some time at Trail Finders.
yeah.
I mean, does that seem an absolute lifetime ago?
It does. I was living in London. I mean, as soon as you have kids, anything without kids seems like a lifetime ago. But yeah, it does. I mean, I loved it. I loved the life in London. We're in our early 20s. All my friends were there. I mean, lots of nights I can't remember, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think as we got towards getting married in late 20s, you started not going out as much. You started ending up going and going to the local pub, and you think, well, why am I in London? It's
Okay.
very expensive here, and I'm not actually making the most of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that coupled with the whole desire to have a bit more direction in my life, I guess, led me back here.
Yeah. So how long were you traveling for? Where did you go?
Yeah, for about 11 months,
Wow.
through 4 months or so in Southeast Asia, 6 weeks in New Zealand, a couple of weeks in Fiji, and then
Amazing.
about 4 months in South America.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing. Like and I've done other bits and pieces. I've been lucky in my life. I've spent a lot of time abroad, done a lot of stuff.
And was it during that time away when you're thinking towards the farm sort of started, or did it not clicked in at that point?
So it was. I can tell you the moment. So I sound a bit fancy, don't I? But we were on holiday in Namibia, and I work for a travel company, so I've got
Yeah.
cheap
Yeah.
flights and all
Exactly.
this. And Emma was like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And she said, you want to be your own boss. You want to work outdoors. You want to have some control. She said, well, that's what your dad does. He's his own boss. He works outdoors. All this. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was the moment, really, when I came back from that. 2007, I came on my days off from Trail Finders. I'd come down and work down here, and just fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the cows. Before it'd been tractors, but something about the cows. I knew nothing, so I was coming in completely cold. I knew nothing about cows at all. I hadn't been back to the farm properly for about 10 years. Only for Christmases and to say hello to the folks. So for me, it was a completely fresh start. Yeah.
What was that first day back like, as it were? Can you remember that?
I can remember it because it was January. It'd been like, I don't know, 5th of January, probably weather a bit like it is outside at the moment with Storm Christoph. And I was told to go onto the silage clamp and start moving some tyres. And I just thought, wow, this is great. I don't say that all the time now, but back then, from sitting inside on a phone in the basement of Harrods, and suddenly I'm outside with the wind whistling through my hair, I was like, yeah, brilliant.
Tell me about the business itself today. So your autumn block carving, Holstein Friesians, and you're organic. But tell me a bit more.
Yeah, so both farms are fairly or going to be run on similar lines. Yeah, autumn calving. We've always been autumn calving, run a kind of self-feed, simple system. Anyone who knows dairy farms down here, most of them are autumn calving, run along the lines of a guy called Kay Carslaw, who set up low-cost dairy systems. He was my grandpa's consultant and my dad's mine.
Okay.
So he was the kind of common thread that ran through the whole family. So yeah, we try and keep it as simple as possible. I mean, on this farm here, we can graze, well, anytime from, depends on the weather, but late January through to late October time. Cows housed in the winter on self-feed, mainly grass or whole crop silage. My focus on fertility. So since taking over from Dad, really sort of learned from, we had some really good performers in our costing group, and we learned how to get, a sort of 6 or 7 week calving block. And Luke and I, so Luke, who manages the other farm, turned from a sort of 15-week block into a 6-week block, and all the benefits that brought to the farm and the business. So yeah, fertility. So we're breeding Irish or New Zealand type Holstein Friesian grazing cows, 550 kilos, nice and light, and good capacity to eat lots and lots of forage, and turn them into milk solids. So we're on with Arla, so we have to produce solids for them. And then so I'm the contract farmer here. So I set up my business, Burdett Farming Limited, in 2013.
Okay.
So I bought the first set of heifer calves born that year, and then I reared them. And then 2 years later, they started milking, and then the contract pays me a fee to have them. So I now have all bar 20 of the cows here as a result. And then the new farm, Boar Place, bought into that's on a contract, and that's run in conjunction with a trust, the Commonwealth Organic Trust. A big educational and conference facility over there, so quite different. So they're autumn calving. Yeah, they've been organic for a similar length of time as well, but probably a lot of underinvestment there. So the big thing there is trying to get the farm back on the straight and narrow.
Okay, can you just tell me a bit more about them, actually?
I was interesting because when I first came back to the farm, I volunteered for one of their open days just to stand on the door and my dad's been a trustee over there for a while. So they're basically set up by the Waits Trust in the sort of late 70s. He was a big house builder, and he bought this farm in Kent to bring people out to the countryside and see where the food comes from, particularly for educational purposes. So there's a lot of kids there with special educational needs. Plus other school parties coming hopefully out of London and the local area. So they've got full-time teachers, classrooms there. They've got a big house. They have weddings, lots of conferencing facilities, glamping, lots of things. So they were trying to do it all themselves, and 2 or 3 years ago they made a decision that you just can't do that. So, so trying to not outsource it, but bring in partnerships within it. So they've done that with a glamping, done that with a veg garden, the horticulturist and so I'm kind of the next step for that. So it's really exciting to be part of it. I think a big part of regenerative agriculture is the people side of it. But obviously we're all talking, all farmers on social media. There's so much about, how do we talk to the public and get access to them and tell our story. So it's a really good platform, hopefully post-COVID, when things return to normal, we can start to look back at that again. Getting our message out there, but getting kids on farms, it's really, really hard, with all the bureaucracy that surrounds it to get kids on farms, and they've got the doors that can open, they know who to talk to and things like that. So really, really interesting, Ben.
You've also become a strategic farm for the HDB. Why do that?
I'll tell you why I did it, because the day I came back to the farm, Dad said to me, you've got to go to the discussion group. So movers and shakers.
Okay.
hilariously titled. It's our local discussion group, and I've learned everything. Most of the things I know through those guys. I mean, have been an absolute backbone of everything I've done. I'm a firm believer in discussion groups and getting out of off farm, talking to people. You know, the honesty that people show when you know, the warts and all approach to it is just fantastic. And so I've gleaned so much from that, and I guess I feel I'd like to give back a bit, so hopefully people can come here and learn. But also, we've still got a lot of things that we're not doing that well and that we can learn from others. So it also puts the team here, it gives them exposure to other people on the farm, so they're not isolated. Well, in normal circumstances, they're
Yeah.
not isolating. So yeah, that hasn't gone to plan so far, but you know, I think
Not really your fault.
people in the farming industry were quite happy sitting in the farm, and you know, some were quite introverted often, and the more you expose people, the more comfortable they feel with that, and the more they're willing to talk to strangers and things like that. So yeah, lots of reasons, Ben.
Yeah. You are doing some experiments on the farm. I know you mentioned that your regen stuff hasn't been brought into place in full flow yet. But tell me about your agroforestry experiment.
Yeah, I think the trees are turning up tomorrow. So
Okay.
like everyone else I see on Twitter, we're going
Very
to be planting
timely.
trees. Yeah. So it'll be a mixture of fruit, nut, yeah, kind of traditional, you know, oak and etc. But the difference is, because we're a dairy farm, there's not that many dairy farms doing them in fields, and everyone does them in rows, you know, so you've got alleyways,
Yeah.
but 240 cows charging up an alleyway is only, and on a slightly wet day, it's just going to crucify the field. So I don't know. Between me and my dad's got a grand plans of individually fencing up each tree, Ben, and burying electric cable in between them. I don't know. There's no one else. There's no one else that I can find who's doing it. I mean, if anyone listening to this has got any great ideas, that'd be good. I mean, we looked at the kind of fenceless stuff, but I think for one paddock, and I think actually cows don't enjoy that. So actually, someone today mentioned to me about cactus guards.
Okay.
I have a look into, like, really horrible guards. So that I might have a look at that. But yeah, the idea is, you know, we want to. This is on this was woodland, this field, up until about 100 years ago. So we just want to see what it does. I don't really know how the cows are going to behave. I don't quite know how it's going to work fencing it, but it's worth doing. We'll try and do the paddock next to it next year and go from there. I don't think we're going to do the whole farm, because we're in Sussex and there's a lot of trees in Sussex already.
Yeah.
But you know, why not? Why not give it a go? It could provide another enterprise in the years to come.
Yeah, that's what experiments are for. We're going to move on to the bit of the show where we talk about bigger questions. I'm not quite sure what I was thinking when I wrote this question, because it's massive. But do you think that UK ag is moving in the right direction at the moment?
It's really hard, isn't it? Because the world that I inhabit, how many farmers are inhabiting that? I think the next 2 or 3 years will be pivotal in the agro environment schemes. I think there's not enough detail out there yet to convince me that it's going to benefit the farmers. I worry a lot about, there's a lot of us, you know, we're tenanting land on short-term lets, you know, what does landlords want? You know, I think if you're in control of the land, then that's, you know, then we can move in a direction. But if you're dealing with a number of different landlords, you've got to bring everyone with you. So there's a huge challenge from that. I think all the ideas are there. I think we've still got the issue that food is undervalued in general, and the supply chain is dominated by supermarkets, and that government wants cheap foods. So yes, will being paid for environmental goods work? I don't know. I think from my perspective, I want to do things because I want to do them, not because I've been paid for it. But if my BPS is going, what's it going to be replaced with? Am I going to have to tick a lot of boxes? Am I going to do things that I don't really want to do? So I think in general, yes, but there's a lot of detail yet to come.
Yeah. I mean, what in the next 10 years? And yes, I mean, we don't really know what's going to be happening, but is there anything, perhaps on your own farm level, that you're really looking forward to over the next 10 years?
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And things are starting to move here a little bit. My kind of vision. Well, whenever we've done open farm Sundays, I've always tried to bring in local food producers, and actually, I'd like to do that as well. I'd like to be one of those local food producers. And actually, I can't sit here and complain about the power of the supermarkets and not try and do something about it. So yeah, I think I am excited because that whole thing about diversity and bringing other people on board, it's starting to move now. We're going to have an eggmobile on the farm this summer, hopefully.
Aye, brilliant.
And so the herd manager, his wife or partner, Frankie, is looking to do that. So she's on site. She's very passionate about that, producing, raw milk, cheese, all sorts of things. As soon as the door opens, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. So I think I need to be brave, and I think by putting a chink in the door, actually, I'm quite excited now. But also our understanding of the soils and things like that. I want to move on. I want to keep going with that. I see our farm improving, but what more can we do?
We always finish the show with the same two questions. The first is, if you had a message for the public, what would it be and why?
Come and find out more about your local farmers. I think I think farmers are really interested in talking to people. There's too much kind of negative stuff about people on footpaths and confrontations with farmers, but actually farmers are really passionate and really love talking about it. There's some great local food being produced. There's some really interesting stories behind it all. So, go and support your local farmer, and don't do it just during lockdown. When things open up again, stick with them.
And finally, a message for your fellow farmers.
All right. Message to fellow farmers. On regenerative agriculture. I mean, don't do it because someone tells you to do it. Don't do it because your advisor said there's a grant for something so you can do it. If you're thinking about, just go and see someone who's doing it. The great thing about regenerative agriculture, and a lot of farmers actually in general, but is people are more than happy to talk to you about it, and they'll tell you the full story. Do it because you believe that you want to make a change. Do it because you think that something needs to change on your farm because you can't carry on doing what you're doing. So find out what that change is. Take someone along on the journey with you. Don't try and do it on your own. Whether it's your wife, your husband, or your boss, the guy who drives the tractor, the guy who milks the cows, or your advisor, whoever. Just make sure someone is there who believes in the same thing that you do, because you're sure as hell you're going to need support as you go through that journey, and you've got to bring someone along with you for the ride.
Wise words. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really good to find out a little bit more about your business as well. And I would love, when all this is over, to actually come down and see you on the farm.
Definitely. I'd love to see you, Ben, anytime.
It's Farmer Focus.
West Sussex dairy farmer Dan Burdett. Next time, we'll be discussing the Food Farming and Countryside Commission's latest report, Farming for Change, Mapping a Route to 2030. And I'll be joined by the FFCC's CEO, Sue Pritchard, and the RSPB's CEO, Becky Spate. So I hope you can join me for that. Until then, have a great week.